Number 3 says quarterbacks in the CIF average 78 passing yards per game with a standard deviation of 13 yards. Running backs average 34 rushing yards per game with a standard deviation of 9 yards. And then so Carlos, so those are the averages for the league. And then our guy Carlos throws for 85, and our guy Ray throws for 49. The question's kind of asking which one, if you look at Part C says which athlete had the better game or the more impressive game. Now, right, you could say, oh, well, Carlos threw for more than what Ray ran for, but on average, the quarterback is throwing for more than what the guy runs for. So what we have to do is that you kind of heard this phrase, kind of, apples to apples, oranges to oranges. So we have to compare things in a like way. So there's different, being a quarterback is different in many ways than being a running back. So if we say, well, who had the better game, what we have to do is compare each person to their peers. So I got to compare Carlos, the quarterback, to other quarterbacks, and then I got to compare Ray, running back, to other running backs, and then we could get a better idea of maybe who had a better game, right, as compared to their peers. So first of all, we got to find the standardized value. So again, that's finding our z-score. So we got two people again here. So we got Carlos, and then we've got Ray. And let's just kind of identify some information here. So for Carlos, our quarterback, we've got an average of 78 with a standard deviation of 13. So remember, our notation here is our average of 78, standard deviation of 13. And what did Carlos do? Carlos threw for 85. Let's talk about Ray. So Ray ran for 49, and the average here is going to be 34 with a standard deviation of 9. So what I want to compare is that, how did each person do as compared to their average? So if I take the z-score, let's draw a quick curve here to get a visual of what's happening. So average is 78. We're just going to kind of sketch this out real quick, doesn't have to be perfect. And a standard deviation of 13. So if I go one standard deviation to the right, so here's our average, here's one standard deviation. So if I add 13 yards to 78, right, that puts me at 91. So, and we're saying that Carlos, he threw for 85. So he's somewhere in between the average and a little above average, right? Here's average, here's one standard deviation above the average. And so he's somewhere kind of in the middle there. So he's above average, but we then want to compare how much above average is he. Well, let's talk about Ray then. So, and I know in the first two we kind of really sketched out the graph. Here we don't have to get as fancy, we're just trying to get a visual. So Ray, the average of 34 with a standard deviation of 9. So here's our average. If we go out 1, we're at 43. And then if we go out 2, we're at 52. So here's one standard deviation, there's two standard deviations. And then, so where's Ray? So Ray rushed for 49. So Ray's also above average, but you notice he's further above the average. So we're probably thinking that Ray had a more impressive game because he's higher above the average, right? But we'll actually want to run some numbers to see what that looks like. So what that looks like is that we're going to standardize our value here. So we're going to find our z-score. So for our z-score here, remember the number we're talking about, which is 85, minus the average, which is 78, and then divided by the standard deviation, which is 13. So if we do all that, if we do 85 minus 78, and then we divide that by 13, we end up getting 0.53. We can round that to maybe 0.54. So we'll say approximately 0.54. And that should make sense because he was somewhere in between the average and one standard deviation, kind of about halfway in between there. So that's why our number is 0.5. What would you think Ray's z-score is going to be? Well, he's in between 1 and 2. So we're thinking 1 point something, maybe 1.5. I don't know. Let's see. So for him, Ray ran for 49 when the average for running backs is 34, and then with a standard deviation of 9. So let's see what his comes out to be. So we're going to take 49 minus 34 and then divide that by 9, and we get 1.66. We said 1.67. So, and again, that fits with what we thought it would be because he was in between 1 and 2 standard deviations. So that's where we get that z-score 1.67. Now, what do we do with that? So we know that both of them were better. This is 50%, right? So we both know that they were better than 50% of their peers. We just want to know how much better. And so that's where that gets into, we're looking for the percentile. So for Carlos, he has a z-score of approximately 0.54. So what we want to know is that what percentage, so here's Carlos, what percentage of quarterbacks is Carlos better than? Here's the halfway point, so we say he's better than halfway, so maybe 60, 70, I don't know, that's what we want to look for. So this is where we have to go back to our table, and remember I had a number of 0.54. So what we'll do is that here's 0.5, and then so the 0.54 part, I'm going to go until I get 4. So I get a number here of 0.7054, 0.7054, which if I convert that to a percent, right, like if I move that over 2 decimal places, so we could say roughly 71%, right? So what that means is that Carlos threw for more than actually I don't want to change that a little bit. Let's say that Carlos's, so we'll say Carlos's, apostrophe S there, passing yards were higher than 71%, higher than 71% of the quarterbacks. Okay, so that's good, right? So he's definitely above average. But we want to see how did Ray do? Right? So how does Ray do compared to other running backs? So let's compare Ray. So Ray had a score of 1.67. So his z-score is approximately 1.67, which means that he did almost 2 standard deviations higher than the average. So let's go to our table and see what that translates to. So we're looking for 1.67. So here's 1.6, and then I'm going to slide over till I get to the 7. And I get 0.952, cut off there, 0.9525. So we'll say 0.9525, which is approximately 95%. So we knew that his z-score was higher, and so we knew that, I was talking about Ray, so we knew that he was further over on that curve, meaning that he was higher, right, than more people. So So it turns out that he's higher than 95% of other running backs. So we could say that Ray's rushing yards were better or higher than 95% of other running backs. So in answering the question, which player had the more impressive performance, we would say Ray, because he outperformed his peers to a greater degree than Carlos. So they both were above average. It's just Ray was more above average, right? So we would say that Ray had the more impressive performance there. All right, so go ahead and pause 4, try 4 on the right, and then you're almost done.